always have the energy that we want and need, and we don't always have the time right now in this midpoint of life to exercise the way we want to. So when you're looking for what are some other low-hanging pieces of fruit, this is it right here. Look, I'm Debra Atkinson. I am the founder of Flipping 50 and the host of the first and the only exclusively made for menopause fitness membership in the world. And I've been doing this for 40 years. I'm 60, so flipping 60, and you know, things have changed. Things change for all of us. Here's 5 of them. So these are common denominators among people who have a more optimal sense of body composition, meaning a little bit more muscle, a little bit lower body fat, carrying it in optimal places. And the number 1 is higher protein intake than most individuals. So the rule of thumb is indeed 1 gram of protein per pound of ideal body weight, but higher protein intake in that range, as opposed to, you know, the RDA's, the range is between 10 and 35%, which is an oddly crazy wild range. That is 10% of your total calories is extremely low compared to 35. So it's outrageous, number 1. It's not very user-friendly. And none of us are going to sit down and do math. We break it into at least 30 to 35 grams of protein, at least. That's a minimum. It's not a maximum at a time. So you're having, say, 3 meals of that, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Where's that put us? Well, somewhere between 90 and 105 grams of protein. I'm going to guess you don't weigh 90 pounds. So if, for instance, I weigh 130 pounds, I'm shooting for 130 pounds. Now, I may be aiming for that moon landing in the stars, but that's going to be better than not. So if I hit 125 grams of protein, probably also still making it easier for myself to burn lean muscle mass. So let me tell you how that works. Number 1, all we've found through the research, this is both in perimenopausal women and postmenopausal women who were subjects in studies, is that not changing your calorie intake at all, but changing the calories making up that total and increasing the amount of protein that made up those calories increased the amount of lean muscle mass. And when you do that, fat loss gets easier. So it's an easy switch to be more satisfied when you sit down at meals. So it didn't matter as much whether the remainder of those calories was a little bit more carb, a little bit more fat, or split between the two. But the protein needed to be high, and the calories, if they didn't change at all, the manipulation of the amount of food that came from protein was the deal. So think about that. Think about if you know what calories you're taking in, and I'm not a calorie counter. I'm not a macro counter, actually, but every once in a while, a snapshot can be really important. So using an app and doing a 3 to 5 day food log gives my clients a sense of, here's where I'm at, and I didn't even realize it. I thought I was eating, in most cases with my clients, a lot more. They're almost always under eating. And that can get a woman into trouble, slowing down metabolism. The bump of protein actually gives you a little bit more post-meal thermogenesis. What that means is simply from eating, your body takes more calories to digest that protein than it does other food, namely carbohydrates. And if you eat in excess of fat, that is much more easily stored as fat. Just FYI. Okay, number 2, higher water consumption. The recommendation now is a little bit more also tied to your body weight. However, I'm going to take this and say that what I know to be true is those who actually do better drink a little bit more water than this. So the recommendation by dietitians now is much more take your body weight, half of that, your pounds, in ounces of water should be about your daily intake. Use that as a guideline. That's your framework, your blueprint. And then imagine I'm in Phoenix right now, it's 110 every day. It's been that way for 6 to 8 weeks. Don't get me talking about that. But we're in and out of it constantly. And so it's probably wise to be drinking a little bit more water, giving your pets a little bit more water on the daily, and making sure you're taking in electrolytes as well. If you're somebody who exercises on a regular basis, we're going to be sweating more of that out. So you also probably want a little bit more than just that average recommendation for function on a daily basis. So if you exercise, you're in hot and or hot humid conditions, you also want more. It actually can be a little bit more tricky for you who, like me, we're in hot, not humid, hot and dry conditions. Because if you're in hot, humid conditions, you actually can see it on your skin. You know you're losing fluids. If you're in a hot, dry climate, you tend to sweat just a little bit less. And that's kind of keeping a clue from you that, you're losing water and you're going to need some. So pay attention to that. The second thing about hydration I want you to pay attention to is if you are out and you're sweating, I want you to pay attention to your skin after the sweat. Is it salty? And you can either see it and feel it. Your skin actually feels rough, or you'll see it in your clothes. If I had a visor on and I was outside sweating, I would actually see a rim of salt, like a margarita on my visor. Or if I were biking, I would see salt on my shorts when I was finished. And that will tell you that you're losing a little bit more salt or sodium in your sweat. And we will lose those electrolytes. So you're somebody who needs to have a little more salt, a little more electrolyte overall in their water on a regular basis. And that's not just when you're working out. So throughout the day, I've become a huge fan of Element. So N.E.A.T, the electrolyte company. Some of you will look at that and think that's really high in sodium, and I have no affiliate account. I would love to, I beg them, but there's all the electrolytes are in it, but it's 1,000 milligrams of sodium per little bag. So you can put that though and dilute it in as much water as you want to. So in a big 32 ouncer, you can do it in 16. So it's really salty or not as salty, depending on your activity level potentially. But sipping on something with electrolytes during the course of the day can be a real game changer, especially for those of you who think, when I drink more water, I just pee more. I'm just in the bathroom more. And you're starting to shut yourself off earlier at night, and you're not drinking water if you know you're going to be on a plane, which is exactly the time you need to drink more water, by the way. But what's happening if you drink more water and you pee more frequently is that water is actually not necessarily hydrating you. It's running right through you. What you need is, what we tend to avoid is retaining the water a little bit more. When we store water in our muscle. It's there so that it's ready to be released. We're going to have far more energy. And here's a clue you may not know. We get our energy from salt. If you don't have salt, if you're avoiding salt shakers on the table, you're feeling very virtuous, you may actually be shooting yourself in the foot. So you take a good look at, are you getting the right kind of sodium in your diet and or drinking electrolytes? So sodium, potassium, and magnesium all make up those electrolytes that we need on a daily basis, especially if you need them to replenish sweat from hot, humid conditions, from exercising, and just cumulative effect of being in and out of the heat. All right, so number one, number two, protein and water. Number three is sleep is a priority for people who have more optimal body weight and or who find it's easier to lose weight. There's a significant study done quite a while back it was published in the Obesity Journal. And what they found is that there were long sleepers and short sleepers. So the long sleepers were given 9.5 hours of sleep. Now, nobody could say, sleep, but they had to be lights out for 9.5 hours. The other group did the same exact weight loss program. So same movement, same diet, And the other group only got 5.5 hours of sleep. So they were the short sleepers. At the end of the program, they compared results. Now, both groups lost weight. The program was effective. However, the distinct difference was those that were the long sleepers, more of the weight that they lost, and they did lose more than the short sleepers, and more of that weight. So it was fat. They lost less lean muscle mass. And the average, is anywhere between 15, 15, and 50% muscle lost when you're losing weight. So for every pound you lose, half of that might be muscle. That's not good. And in some bigger weight loss, especially if it's an extreme and it's happening quickly, up to 75% of that, 3/4 of that can be a muscle loss. We want to minimize losses of muscle as much as we can, and we do it a couple of ways. One, while you're creating that caloric deficit, you increase your protein intake, and we do resistance training, hopefully, while you're doing it. But sleep is the other way. Sleep helps regulate your release of a couple of hormones, testosterone and growth hormone, that help with achieving lean muscle mass. So if we don't get in and stay regularly in those deep cycles of sleep, when those two hormones that are critical for muscle are happening and released, we miss out. It's like we don't seal the deal on the workouts that we're doing. And cortisol is out of control the following day. And while those two hormones are actually stimuli for muscle, cortisol breaks down our muscles. So sleep deprivation hurts us in so many ways. So it's all about prioritizing your sleep and also making sure that your bedtime and your wake time are very frequently the same. So you're not, getting same hours and thinking, well, 8 hours is 8 hours. It's actually not. So if you're used to go to bed at 10, you get up at 6. What studies have found is that going to bed at midnight, getting up at 8, the quality of the sleep is not quite the same. So there's something to be said for going to bed earlier. And most often, people who are active, people who are more optimally body comped, are going to bed earlier. They're the ones who are turning in sooner and more likely to be energetic and up and ready to go in the morning. So we're not going to change you necessarily if you're a night owl and you've always been one, but it may not be to your advantage if you're pushing bedtime back and you get stuck watching a movie and you just can't stop. So think about what you're doing before bed. Think about a consistent bedtime, and most importantly, a consistent wake-up time. Okay, higher protein, higher water, higher sleep priority. And number 4 is people with optimal body composition, especially women over 40, generally don't drink much alcohol. Sorry. So those of you that love your wine, until you get that body composition under control, I wouldn't reintroduce alcohol. It's going to be really hard for you to lose. But what happens when you drink wine, for instance, before a meal? So you go out and you're enjoying, and when do we do that? We have the wine generally before we have any food. Now, here's what happens is as soon as you drink that wine, remember, or any alcohol, is metabolized as sugar. So it would be, if you can imagine, spooning sugar into you before you sit down to eat. You would never ever do that. But in fact, that is what you're doing. Except you're inhibiting your good thinking process in the same time. So what happens with the food that you're eating afterward, even if it is kale and salmon and quinoa, is more of that food is being stored as fat, because the sugar in the alcohol kind of took up space first, and you elevated your blood sugar, so you elevated your insulin levels. So anything that you eat afterward is more likely to be stored as fat. Anything. Doesn't matter how healthy that meal is. So consider that the next time you eat and or drink. But if you are inclined to drink alcohol, here's a little tip I'll give you, that the order that you consume something that is going to have a negative impact on your blood sugar and insulin and therefore on your fat storage, if you eat it last or you have that drink as an after dinner drink, it may have less of an impact, a less negative impact than if you had it first. So eat and drink together or have the glass of wine after dinner. But if you wait, again, if you wait 2 hours to then have the wine, again, it's going to have a negative impact on you and metabolizes sugar, elevating blood sugar, elevating insulin, and put you right back into fat storage right before you go to bed. Is that really what you want to do? Okay, next and last is movement. And ironically, I want you to hear this. This is not exercise. So of all things compared, if we look at your working out, we look at the burning calories that you might be doing, going for those long walks and briskly done, or doing your interval training, or doing your resistance training, that counts less for your risk of obesity, high fatness, than does your overall movement. So if you can break up your day with going for short walks, even a very recent study came out that showed if you're using the major muscles in your body several times throughout the day, doing 10 air squats, so no weight, just you standing, sitting, your blood sugar level stays more stable during that day compared to any other day eating the same foods. So your movement during the day and the amount of time that you're active really matters. Now, if you could compare things, compare this. So I could be lying on the couch, taking a nap, lying on the couch, reading a book, very, very relaxed, compared to me sitting up, performing, doing a video for you, or standing up, playing with the dog. So I'm looking at levels up. Very light activity to a little bit higher to a little bit higher, versus if I were picking up the house and cleaning up for company, making the beds, doing the laundry, back and forth, taking the dog for a walk, going higher and higher. So all of those pieces of activity over the course of, say, the 23 hours that I'm not just exercising in a gym matter so much more than just working out. Like, how many calories did you burn? Well, I was on a treadmill earlier today doing interval training, working extremely hard, but I got off and I had burned less than 200 calories. And I was on that treadmill for maybe 22 minutes and working really hard during some of those intervals, running harder than Debra likes to run. And the total energy expenditure was not all that great. 200 calories is not very much. And yet, when you look at all day long, and let's agree, 23 hours of the day, somebody will say, but I sleep, so that's not going to count. I get it. But if you have strength trained, you create lean muscle mass, you also are burning more calories, by the way, while you're sleeping than if you're somebody who does not lift weights. So stay with me. But let's think about your waking hours. This is moving more throughout the day is far more important than just that 30 to 60 minutes. Now I know sometimes you can't. Sometimes you just have 9 hours of sedentary time because you're traveling and you have to sit and you're in an airport, or you are in a meeting at a conference. Sometimes conferences are the worst, even for fitness professionals. I will agree with that. But almost inevitably, somebody is going to give you a break. There's a break between sessions to go to the restroom. There is a break when you could tell a little white lie and pretend you have a back issue and you need to stand in the back of the room. You can find a way to be, I can't tell you how I know that, but you can find a way to be active. So breaking up sedentary time, N.E.A.T time, is very valuable. Now you might have to go into the bathroom to do those 10 air squats every hour, But even those little things actually have proven to help decrease your blood sugar spikes during the day. If we stabilize blood sugar, we keep insulin down, we stay out of fat storage. These are really important little tips. So be more active and beware. So what I find so much is women over 40 just want to lose weight so badly and so quickly that they will exercise themselves to exhaustion and then want to be on the couch much of the day, want to conserve energy the rest of the day. And it's the opposite effect that you want. You want the minimum viable fitness that you exercise this much and then you are sky high with energy the rest of the day. So you want to be just a busy little beaver moving around constantly. So you all know, there are a lot of things on our quote unquote list of things to do that we sometimes don't do because we don't have the energy to sustain it. And it sounds great. I'd like to have that done, but I really don't have the energy to do it. I'm just going to lay here on the couch. If that's you, don't over exercise. Try to under exercise. Do a little bit less and see if you can be more active. Inevitably, even some of the influencers who were talking about their own menopause journey, Chalene Johnson comes to mind. It took her a while, didn't it, to realize that just walking more was the difference. So it's dawned on her that it's walking more, movement during the day. It's not necessarily about quote unquote steps, but inevitably, if you're cleaning house, you're doing laundry, you are putting in steps. So it might show up differently for you, but those are it. Those are the 5 things that are most related to increasing your fat burning and optimizing your body composition. Higher protein intake, higher water consumption, sleep is a priority, and it's consistent. Bedtime and wake time, lower alcohol or limited or eliminated alcohol consumption, and movement, more movement every day. Love to hear your questions.